So I'm going to go back to doing more of these textual debunking videos while continuing to make videos with Lord Killian, but he just never seemed a good fit for this kind of analysis, so I hope you like this new artwork. It was done by Tabuesa, and you can find the link to her channel in the description. So this video is going to be about a response to a question posted on Quora: why do so many people loathe libertarians? And in particular, a response from Keldon Alleyne, who gives what he claims are 10 reasons why, and which is the most upvoted response, so it's not like I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel. He really sets the tone for his list right off the bat. 1. Out of touch with reality. Everyone and their cat knows from past experiences that corporations are capable of all manners of misconduct in the name of profit, willfully poisoning our water supplies without our knowledge, and deliberately putting soldiers' lives at risk by selling fake bomb detectors. This is funny because all of his examples involve cases where government is at least a major player. Corporations only exist because governments give them special powers, limit their liability, and pass regulations that help shield them from the consequences of their actions, not to mention bailing them out because they're too big to fail. His first example is water supplies, which are managed by government, and his other example is providing fake bomb detectors to soldiers, which is done by the military. But really, this is a Nirvana fallacy. No one is saying that there is never going to be cases of fraud, but notice he does nothing to compare fraud that takes place purely in the private sector with fraud committed in the public sector. In the purely private sector, even if we're going to go with a ridiculous straw man that we don't want any courts or arbitrators or DDROs or anything else like that, people are going to financially punish fraudsters. They won't buy products for them. They won't want to sell to them. They'll be complete economic outcasts. I mean, think about it. Who nowadays would do business with Bernie Madoff? Not to mention the fact that he did nothing to show that the amount of fraud that we would need government to protect us against comes anywhere close to the cost of government itself, which in the US is now over $4 trillion a year, not counting state and local governments, and also not counting a $21 trillion national debt, as well as over $100 trillion in unfunded liabilities by even conservative estimates. He needed to make a proper comparison with the private market and government here, and he didn't even try. 2. Unrealistic expectations of market forces. To the libertarian, at least the vocal ones, the godlike deity of market forces will decide everything in the best way possible. Can anyone say straw man? It would be nice if people would criticize libertarians for what we really say. Market forces is just another way of saying peaceful people interacting voluntarily with one another to their mutual benefit. The only alternative to that is aggression, and the burden of proof is on him to show that aggression actually works, given pretty much all of history which shows that it doesn't. To them, prices will be most ideal, so doctors wouldn't say hike prices because insurance companies will pay them and happily offload to the customer like they currently do. There will be no price fixing like there currently is. First of all, price fixing is done by governments. Price fixing is when you make it illegal to charge more or less than a certain amount. And the effect he mentioned about doctors and insurance companies is the result of over half a century of government intervening in the healthcare industry. It's a direct result of protectionist regulations that favor insurance companies. It's a continual source of amazement to me that pretty much every single time one of these bozos tries to point out a problem with libertarianism, they point to a problem caused by government when government is doing things that libertarians are vociferously against. Prices are a means of communication between buyers and sellers. The price mechanism is the only reliable means of economic calculation that's ever been found. Every time government interferes with that, bad things happen. Not only that, but since prices are a form of communication, government price controls comprise violations of freedom of speech. 3. A very weird way of viewing choice. There will always be enough jobs offering a reasonable wage, safety, and work-life balance. It's just that people may choose a reprehensible job because it's their best choice. Like, I'd rather lose one of my legs than my hands if I work in an office. It's a choice. This is completely nonsensical. Not only is his answer unparsable gibberish, can anyone tell me any possible way that there can be any amount of harm that befalls someone just because you gave them an option? If I offer to give you a job mowing my lawn for 5 cents, you aren't going to take that offer because it's absolutely ridiculous. But you're suffering no greater harm than you were before I made the offer. You still weren't mowing my lawn, and I still wasn't giving you 5 cents. Nothing for you has changed. But let's say I get someone to mow my lawn for $10 and it takes them 2 hours. They took that option because it was their best among their alternatives at the time. As anyone familiar with the economic concept of opportunity costs knows, they would only take the offer if it's worth more to them than their best alternative, meaning I've made them better off. If that's not the case, they wouldn't have done it. But then someone like you comes along and figures out that I'm only paying him $5 an hour, and you've arbitrarily and subjectively determined that that's too little. So what do? You pass a minimum wage law, making this option illegal. It is now against the law for me to make him this offer. And that makes him better off how? He's now left with that other alternative, which is not as beneficial to him as the offer I would have made. And in before, hey, a mugger gives you an option too, your money or your life. Yes, I've had statists actually say that to me. A lot. And it's absolutely ridiculous. The mugger is removing options, specifically the option of you walking down the street unmolested. Government and criminals remove options. The free market creates them. 4. Willful ignorance of why liberals prefer tax to charity to support those in need. Oh, we know why. Because you want to force other people to give instead of doing it yourself, so you can still feel good about not doing anything. This is why people who support welfare donate significantly less to charity. People simply don't donate 10% of their wage to welfare voluntarily. I don't know where he's getting this 10% figure from. It's certainly not the case the government is actually giving that amount to the poor, but according to OECD data, voluntary private social spending in the U.S. is higher than anywhere else in the world. They calculated that private social spending in the U.S. is almost 11% of GDP, actually more than the 10% figure he cited. And when you combine public and private spending, the United States is second in the world in giving, despite the fact that we're 23rd in the world in public spending. We're second only to France, and in France, that's countered not only by the fact that taxes are higher, but also by the fact that they have a greater portion of their population in need. And this is the OECD, not some wonky libertarian think tank or something. So all of the indications are that there's a greater amount of money for the needy the less government tries to help them, and a smaller portion who actually is needy. They never have, and likely never will, because people living paycheck to paycheck are focused on their own survival, which they'd be foolish not to. Oh, you're just speaking for yourself here. Poor people actually give quite a bit to charity. And there's other things that they do as well, like donating old clothes or donating blood. You might do well to consider the words of Edmund Burke. He who accuses all mankind is sure to convict only one. 5. Occasional sense of superiority. Well, people like you make it easy when you make basic economic boners, don't even try to examine the statistics properly, and then try to attack our characters. Yes, most people have not studied economics and so on, but it's awfully naive to presume it's just because they're ignorant. Perhaps your own stance is because of your own ignorance. Then why is it that we're the ones who are capable of delivering information in economic examinations, whereas it's the statists who are always committing basic economic fallacies like the zero-sum fallacy, the broken window fallacy, or the wage fund fallacy? 6. Diversionary discussion tactics. Show them how regulation was needed in places, they'll show you in places where it came naturally without the government. Right, because that debunks your claim that it was needed. You don't actually show need, you just show somewhere where regulations were in place and just claim that they were needed. But if we can show it happening naturally without government, that demonstrates that they aren't needed after all, and you have not satisfied your burden of proof. 7. Willful ignorance. Libertarian ideals work well when you ignore where they don't work. And yet you cite precisely 0 examples, even though you could have easily done so in another paragraph or two right here. So far, as usual, all of the problems you've pointed to are things that are actually caused by government. So much so they will and have claimed being born rich or having personal family connections is no real advantage. It really isn't that much of one. Look at how often the rags to riches to rags in 3 generations story has played out. Whereas in the US, 92% of millionaires and 62% of billionaires are entirely self-made. I've given those statistics a lot. I have yet to see even one of you respond to them. So this goes back to the point I was making in number 5. You just made bald assertions with nothing to back them up. I debunked it with statistics, and the sources for all of these are in the description. And in fact, those last 2 sources completely destroy the points he was trying to make in numbers 8 and 9, which were really Nirvana fallacies based on strawmen anyway, so we can skip those. 10. Their deluded beliefs tar some good principles. Well, our principles are derived logically from first principles, as I've repeatedly shown. Let's not get into the whole tax is no different to chattel slavery delusion or the assholery political tactics used by the Tea Party. It's funny how he doesn't want to get into any of these principles. Does he not even know what they are? Especially considering how much has been written, how many videos made on our central principle, the non-aggression principle. He doesn't say a word about that. But what, in principle if not magnitude, is the difference between taxation and slavery? Both of them are claiming ownership of at least a portion of your labor. With pure slavery, someone claims 100% of their labor. With chattel slavery, someone claims most of their labor, but lets them have a place to live and some food, even if it's not great. With taxation, for the most part, we can choose what we want to do and whom we want to work for and where we want to live, but we still have someone else claiming ownership over a portion of our labor. And the reason why they don't take more is because they simply aren't at the moment, but all they have to do is raise the tax rate and they can claim even more of the products of our labor. Meaning that they are in fact claiming ultimate ownership over our own bodies and what our bodies are capable of producing. So at what point does it stop becoming slavery? And again, I feel I have to point out that this is the most upvoted response to this question. So there are a lot of people who agree with it. But he didn't do anything to actually criticize libertarianism. He didn't quote any actual libertarians like Murray Rothbard. He just strawmanned our philosophy. He didn't cite any economic data or give any sources whatsoever. He just made bald assertions with nothing to back them up. So what are we supposed to conclude when this response is the one people think is the best? I think we're left with one inescapable conclusion. Why do so many people loathe libertarians? For the same reason fundamentalists loathe apostates. So thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments how you liked this video. Please hit like and subscribe, and consider donating or becoming a patron so I can do more of this. Until next time, stay strong and be free.